On July 4th of 2011, a bicyclist was passing by a marsh when she noticed a pair of human legs sticking out of the water. Frightened, she called 911, and right away they discovered who it was because this person had just been reported missing. This is the day that Nate snapped. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also feeding birds while sitting on park benches. How lovely. But anyway, today we're going over the case of Nathaniel Fujita and what he did on that awful July day. For our story, we're heading to a town in Massachusetts known as Wayland, a relatively smaller population with about 14,000-ish people living here. It's a wealthy area with normally very little crime, but they were about to experience something tragic. On July 4th of 2011, at around 7:30 a.m., a woman was riding her bicycle on a road called Water Row. As she was passing by a marsh, she noticed a pair of human legs sticking out of the water. She thought to herself, "No, this can't be. That kind of stuff just happens on TV. You don't see this in real life." But unfortunately, she did. As this cyclist got off of her bike and got closer to get a better look, she saw a clenched fist sticking out of the water and immediately knew. This woman then called the police, and they arrived in pretty much no time. A state trooper named Anthony DeLucia was the first one to arrive on the scene, and he saw the body in the water and a shoe floating right near it. A few hours would pass, and at about 10:30 a.m., divers removed the body from the water. It was a young woman appearing to be in her late teens to 20s, and she was wearing a dress, but it was covering her neck, chin, and upper part of her body. The state trooper then pulled this woman's dress down to cover her body, and that's when he realized things were much, much worse than they appeared. This woman didn't drown or anything, but she was murdered very brutally. She had been stabbed and her throat was slashed, and she also had a black bungee cord tangled in her hair. This young woman's name was Lauren Astley, and she was 18 years old at the time. She was born on April 1st of 1993 to Mary Dunn and Malcolm Astley. Lauren was an only child, but a very gifted and bright one at that. As a young girl, she began playing the French horn and singing. She got really good at singing, especially, and she also really liked to play soccer. In 2006, at the age of 12, Lauren had gotten the lead role in the play Annie and did a great job at it. This same year, her parents divorced, but they shared custody, so Lauren would go back and forth between their houses. She was an active member of church, also singing in their choir and being a part of their youth group. Now, as Lauren got a little older, she was priming to become a very well-adjusted person. People looked at her as a young woman full of energy, hope, charisma, and a phenomenal personality. Lauren, with her church, had visited New Orleans on 3 separate occasions to help flood victims get back on their feet due to the Hurricane Katrina. Her friends said that she was a trendsetter, a really good friend, one that'll help you with any problem, and just a great person. By the time Lauren got to high school, she started playing tennis and became very good at it, so much to the point that she became the varsity captain. She also got into the all-female a cappella group for singing and the honors concert choir. She was clearly gifted in many different ways and wasn't a very big person. Lauren was only 5 foot tall and weighed a little less than 100 pounds. Now, in her freshman year of high school, especially towards the end, in the spring of 2008, she met another freshman named Nathaniel Fujita. This was Lauren's first serious boyfriend, and they'd be together for several years. We'll talk about him and their relationship in a bit, but first let's get back to Lauren. Lauren had plans, aspirations, goals, like many of us do. In her senior year, she managed to become the varsity captain of the tennis team, and she also had her first solo in a concert and did a great job at it. At this same time, Lauren was also driving, and she knew how to drive a stick shift, and she was working at a clothing store called 344. She was super interested in the fashion business, and in school, she was interested in business management. In either May or June of 2011, Lauren would graduate from high school and wanted to attend Elon University. Honestly, everything was looking like it was panning out the perfect way, but little did she know, she had been dating pure evil. Nathaniel, or Nate Fujita, was born on January 29th of 1993 to Tomo and Beth Mattingly Fujita. Now, his father you may have heard of if you're in the guitar world, as he's pretty popular. Tomo is a professional musician and a guitar professor at Berklee College of Music. He's been teaching there for about 30 years and even mentored someone very well known, John Mayer. But anyway, Nate, which I'll now be referring to him as, has an interesting history and family history. Nate had two siblings, and they all got along pretty well. Growing up, he played football and was perceived as a pretty nice kid. But he began to show signs of mental illness when he was about 4 to 5 years old. This wasn't too surprising, though, because of his family history. Two of his great uncles had paranoid schizophrenia, and one of them believed the CIA was watching them through his television. One of his aunts became something called a bag lady, which is a homeless woman who carries all of her belongings in shopping bags. Nate's mother and father both had significant cases of anxiety, and his mother also had depression. One of his cousins had either bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and both of his siblings had anxiety and depression with thoughts of taking their own lives. Nate's younger sister spent 8 days in a locked child psychiatric facility, so there were definitely some things going on. Now, when Nate was about 4 to 5 years old, he was described as being very clingy, and he had trouble separating from his mom. He had a very hard time expressing feelings and started to have some obsessed thinking. Nate started playing football and was popular from a young age. By the time he got to high school and started dating Lauren, for the most part, things were good between them. Nate was a star wide receiver for his high school, being about 6'1" and 185 pounds, and Lauren was also a prominent figure. They got along well, and Lauren basically became a member of his family. She interviewed his dad for a project, and they loved her. They thought she was lovely and great. Lauren would tell her friends things like, "Nate's so cute. He was so, fun and cute last night." But after a bit of time, I'm not exactly sure when, their relationship started to get a bit sour. The couple started to get into fights chronically where they would break up, get back together, and do it all over again. Now Lauren was saying things like, "Nate was so boring. While we were together, he was on his phone the whole time. I'm over it." And by their senior year, she really was over it. On April 1st of 2011, on Lauren's birthday, she broke up with Nate for good. By this period of time, both of them were getting ready to graduate, and Lauren, well, she had a pretty good plan. She was going to go to Elon University in North Carolina and was really looking forward to it because she was going to meet a lot of new people. Lauren was incredibly excited for the future and had optimism and hope. Nate also had a good plan because he was recruited to play football at Trinity College in Connecticut, which was literally his childhood dream. But after Lauren broke up with him, something really changed. Nate, this guy who was really good at football, kind of quiet, funny, and overall a nice person, had drastically changed in a 2-month period for the absolute worse. Nate's uncle George said that the breakup was a horrible thing for him and that he was incredibly sad about it. He asked Nate about going to play football at Trinity, and Nate just didn't even care anymore. He was the type of guy to constantly go to the gym and hang out with friends, but that all ceased. Instead of doing those things, Nate started to just stay home and lie on the couch looking miserable. He began to drink and smoke every day, but this really didn't help him. Lauren would occasionally text him and ask how he was doing because his friends told her they were worried about him. This would really make Nate angry. Nate had a friend group that consisted of himself and 4 other people, and they called themselves the Buddies. But when he started to get depressed and act weird, his friend group became fed up with him and began to look at him as a 5th wheel. The 4 other guys actually made a separate group chat that excluded Nate and started hanging out without him because they just couldn't stand who he was becoming. A few weeks would go by from the time that the couple broke up, and things are about to become really bad. On June 4th of 2011, Lauren had a graduation party with 2 of her good friends, Chloe and Ashley. About 150 of their classmates showed up, and the girls set up a huge tent, and everyone there was having a ton of fun. Well, eventually, Nate and his friends showed up, and things turned upside down. Nate began to follow Lauren around and asking her to just talk to him and listen to him. Lauren put her hands up and put them to her sides, telling Nate to just stay away from her. After this, Nate looked extremely angry and his whole face was squinted. All of a sudden, he walked up to one of the poles that was holding up the tent and punched it. This caused the whole tent to shake and it began to fall over. So about 100 people had to try and hold it up. Lauren's friend Ashley walked up to Nate and told him to take a walk and settle down, but he began to also be agitated with her. Lauren's mom, Mary, was at the graduation party as a chaperone or someone to just help out. She walked up to Nate and told him that he needs to settle down and that him and Lauren were no longer dating, that this was her graduation party and she deserved to enjoy it. Lauren walked up crying to her mother for the 2nd time, and so Mary decided to call Nate's mother, Beth, and asked her to pick him up from the party. Eventually, Nate's mother arrived and picked him up. Now that wasn't the first time Nate got mad at Lauren at a party, because about 2 years earlier in 2009, Lauren kissed another guy while her and Nate were taking a break from their relationship. Nate saw this happen and tried to fight this guy and then got kicked out of the party. While he was being thrown out, he continued to say he wanted to kill this guy, slit his throat, and smash his head on a rock. So obviously, some pretty telltale signs of something to occur. A few days after Nate got kicked out of the graduation party, his mother Beth went to visit Lauren at her place of work at the mall. She asked Lauren if she thinks Nate would be okay at college in the fall, and Lauren told her yes. On June 15th of 2011, Nate was taken to a psychiatrist because he was suffering from major depression and smoking the good green to numb himself. The psychiatrist found symptoms of a major depressive disorder, but Nate, who was 18 at this time, refused to take any more medicine or have any more treatment done. Only a few weeks later, and Nate would snap. On July 3rd of 2011, at about midnight and again at 1:25 a.m., Lauren texted Nate asking him what would be a good time to get together and talk. Hours would go by, and at 9:45 a.m., Lauren was seen on surveillance footage going up the escalator at the mall to get to her job. At 12:36 p.m., Nate then texted Lauren back telling her he'll meet her, and Lauren replied telling him she's at work till about 7. At around 3 p.m., Lauren texted one of her best friends about plans of meeting other friends later in the night, but she didn't mention Nate. Nate, at about 3:15 to 5:15 p.m., went to a family barbecue at his Aunt Joyce's home. Before Nate arrived, Joyce had a talk with her family about how to treat him. She had to remind her husband and daughters that Nate had been going through a difficult time, and it was important to keep the party upbeat. Joyce told them not to ask questions about his breakup and to talk about future things. Nate at this family barbecue appeared normal, and he wasn't angry. At about 5:15 p.m., he would leave his aunt's home and drive right to Lauren's work. CCTV caught him at about 5:36 p.m. at the mall, but it's unclear if he saw Lauren while he was here or if he was low-key watching her. The reason for that is because Nate stopped by a GNC, which is a supplement store, and only about 100 yards or 300 feet away from where Lauren worked. He bought some supplements using his discount card and left shortly after. At 6:13 p.m., Nate called Lauren, but she didn't pick up, and so he texted her a minute later at 6:14 and said, "Call me when you get out." 30 minutes would pass, and at 6:47 p.m., Lauren clocked out of work and then texted her friends she'll meet up with them later. At 6:51 p.m., Lauren called Nate, and it's not very clear what they talked about, but you can see her on surveillance leaving while on the phone. This conversation lasted for about 10 minutes or so, and then Nate called his mother asking her when she'll be home. She wasn't coming home for a long time. Nate then called Lauren and asked her to park down the street so his mom wouldn't see her car. Lauren then texted Nate telling her that she was there, and this is what happened afterwards. As soon as Lauren walked into Nate's garage, the door was still open, and it's unclear as to if they got into an argument or not. But Nate all of a sudden attacked Lauren with a bungee cord, and he started to strangle her, but didn't kill her. Instead, he decided to grab a knife and then slit her throat all the way across and stab her several times in the neck, all while she was still alive. Within literal minutes, because that's how long investigators believe Lauren was alive, she would end up passing away. Immediately, Nate thought to himself, he can't let his mother figure out what happened. So he took Lauren's keys and drove her Jeep to a local beach and left it there, dropping her keys down a storm drain. Nate then ran home and put Lauren into his SUV and decided to drive to a marshy area. He carried her body into the water and threw her into some weeds about 30 feet out. Nate then drove back home at about 7:45 p.m., shirtless with the windows down, blaring music, and then when he got home, he hid some clothing and shoes in the attic of his room. Afterwards, he smoked a little green and then called his parents at 8:08 p.m., asking if they could come home and watch a movie with him. What an absolute yikes. He also asked if he can speak to his cousin, and then asked his cousin to hang out later that night, but she declined because she was busy. On the other side of town, at about 9 p.m., Lauren's friends and family began to become a bit worried because they hadn't heard from her. One of her best friends, Ariel, tried to call her cell phone, but it was turned off, and so Ariel then tried to call Nate. Nate answered the phone, so Ariel said, "Hi, Nate. I know that this is a bit of a long shot, but I was wondering if you had heard from or seen Lauren." Nate replied back to her and said, "No, this is the last place she'd ever be." Ariel then asked Nate how he was because she hadn't seen him in quite some time. Nate said that he was actually in the middle of watching a movie and she interrupted him, so he has to go. So Ariel and another friend went out to look for Lauren, and that's when someone told them they thought they saw Lauren's Jeep at the beach. Ariel and this friend then drove to the beach, and they found her Jeep with the windows open, her purse and computer still inside, but no signs of Lauren. Ariel called Lauren's father and the police, and at 11 p.m., Lauren's father told the police his daughter was missing. The police then went to the Fujita's family home at about 12 p.m. or midnight and talked to Nate and his mom. Nate told them that Lauren stopped by at about 7:45 p.m., but he has no idea where she is, so they left. Not long after, the police visited the Fujita's family home again, and Nate and his mother told them the same story, that they were watching movies all night and Lauren stopped by at like 7:45 p.m. The officer asked for permission to look inside the home and outside, so he did, but unfortunately didn't find anything. At 12:58 a.m. on July 4th, Nate looked up on his computer, "Does water remove fingerprints?" A few hours later, Nate joined a Facebook group called "Have You Seen Lauren Astley?" And at 4:23 a.m., he looked at 2 photos of himself without a shirt on. 2 hours would pass, and at about 6:30 a.m., the police went back to the Fujita's family home. Nate told the police that Lauren could have visited earlier than he told them originally. So the officer asked Nate to check the times on his phone to see, and Nate got defensive and claimed he didn't have his phone. An hour would go by, and at 7:30 a.m., the bicyclist found Lauren's body. The police then went back to the Fujita's family home, and the time was about 9 a.m. They talked to Nate's father, who said that his wife and son left at about 8:30 in the morning to go shopping, and he then went to the police station with them. All day, Nate's father couldn't get into contact with either his son or his wife, and he had no idea where they were. Hours would go by, and at about 6 p.m., Nate and his mother arrived at his aunt's home they were at the night before. Meanwhile, at their home, police were conducting a search warrant. They found a trash bag full of wet, bloody clothing, 2 pairs of sneakers, and a bunch of blood stains all over the place. The police would drive to Nate's aunt's home, and at about 1:45 a.m., he was arrested and taken into custody. So a few years would pass, and Nate was in court and tried to plead not guilty. His defense attorney said that he wasn't in the right mind and suffering from a psychotic break. Also that his family had history of mental illness, and that Nate potentially had CTE caused by head injuries from playing football. But none of that mattered because Nate was found to have been of a sound mind when all of this happened. Absolutely sickening. But Nathaniel Fujita, at the age of 20 years old, was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. So in other words, he's going to rot in his cell, and that's definitely for the best. He violently and brutally murdered someone who he considered to be the love of his life, and afterwards acted so nonchalant. He had zero sympathy and was cold and calculated. It's unclear as to whether or not he planned all of this out, but it's a very, very high chance that he woke up that day and snapped. Nowadays, Nate is spending his days in prison. He's 30 years old and looking for a pen pal. Here's what he wrote. I'm looking for a friend or a companion to talk to on the phone, preferably. If you would like to contact me, just know that I don't like to handwrite letters. If you could set up an email or give me your phone number, that would be good. In here, I like to play sports, dominoes, and chess. I like listening to music, watching TV, and I love talking on the phone. I'm 30 years old and have been in here for 12 years. I'm looking for something fun in my life. My suggestion? That's a terrible idea. Lauren Dunn Astley was a bright young woman full of hope, love, and caring energy who lived her life to the absolute fullest. She had many dreams and beliefs to which would have come true, but unfortunately, her life was cut short by someone she loved and trusted. She trusted Nate so much that she was willing to go to his house alone after work to talk to him, and who knows what would have happened if they could have just talked. I hope that Lauren is resting peacefully and that her family is able to find some closure. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please subscribe and hit the like button because that's all we do. I just want to say I have an all-exclusive Patreon where I post members-only content. 2 tiers, the second and the third one, allow for you to have your name at the end of each High Time Crime video. Thank you all so much for the love and support. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.